And I'll count down from 3, 2, 1. Adi, thank you for meeting with me. I appreciate it.
Very welcome, Mike.
You have
My
an
pleasure.
This is take 2, by the way, because we had some audio problems yesterday. So you have a lot of things going on, a lot of things to tell us about the cafe, a lot of things about yourself. So how about we start with the cafe and you talk about 5758, what it is, what it means, the mission, that sort of thing.
Okay, well, 5758 is actually a training facility that we built. For a while, I've been going from places to places doing training. I figured out that if I have to keep on moving, I couldn't keep the cost low. So we feel that we need to build a space where we can provide trainings for people who want to learn about coffee. And at the same time, trying to keep the costs as low as we can. Why? Because we think that education should be affordable. Well, affordable does not always mean cheap, but then again, if you give something for free, a lot of people will just take it for granted. So 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we built this place. We provide trainings from basic barista trainings, basic manual brew, up to a Q grader class. That time we're the second SEA certified lab. Well, actually, the reasons why we make it as a certified lab is because we want to do Q graded training, and in order to do that, you have to have a lab. So here we are. We have a small coffee shop downstairs. Initially, the coffee shop is part of the training process. Like if we want to do barista class, we're going to do it downstairs. We're located like sort of in the middle of nowhere, so we're not really hoping so much for making money from the coffee shops. As time goes by, we have regular customers now, and then we decided we have to grow, we have to expand the place. So now we have a separate place for barista, and hopefully in the next couple of months, we're gonna also do a SEA roasting class with yours truly.
I look forward to that. And you have a lot of your staff are actually certified either Q grader, Q robusta grader, SCA certification. You want to talk about that some?
We have 2 Q Arabica in-house. We have 3 Q robusta grader in-house. I'm myself a Q Arabica instructor, and hopefully within next year I can push my wife, who is now a Q Robusta assistant instructor, can be an instructor in a year or so. Why? Well, that way we can keep the cost of the class lower. AKA, we don't have to fly people in and pay their fee, which is not that cheap for Indonesia.
Yeah, you keep the instruction in-house.
Yep. We also actually push our barista, our crew, to learn new skills. The company itself, we invest in them. And actually in one of their contract is if within 2 years they're holding the same positions, we're gonna kick them out. So actually we don't want people just sitting and just doing whatever they're doing for 2 years. We want them to move.
That's good.
We want them to grow themselves.
Yeah, and maybe even outgrow the facility itself.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I think that's great. And you were the first Q instructor in Indonesia, correct?
Yes, I am. Why? Well, basically I'm with the first batch of Q graders in Indonesia. I'm one of those pain in the ass people in 2009 who thinks that we know everything about coffee. Then, thank God, nature showed us the other way.
You were a cowboy. What was the term you told me yesterday?
Yeah.
A cowboy?
I'm a cowboy.
Yeah.
So basically we come to coffee shop thinking that we know everything, and then I think time actually tell us and show us that no, you don't really know a lot of stuff. The reasons why I want to become a Q instructor at that time is same with the reason why we built this lab. We want to keep the education affordable. We actually have separate prices for Indonesian and non-Indonesian. The price for Indonesian is like half the price of people coming in from outside Indonesia. It probably does not sound fair, but even half the price that non-Indonesian pay is still a lot of money for Indonesian.
Yeah, the cost of living here is much different than other
Yep.
places. The salaries, the minimum wage,
Yep.
that's all much different here.
Yep.
And that's one of your 7 tenets, right? Is to make sure that you're elevating the local industry, the local coffee scene.
Well, one of the goal we have is to keep the price as low as we can, for a very simple reasons. In the previous days, the one who took the class is gonna be like the coffee shop owners, the people who wouldn't be running the place on day-to-day basis. Just say this owner of able to absorb like 70% of what the instructor gave him. He probably just gonna share that like 50% to his barista or his crew, because these people will be afraid that if they give a lot of knowledge to the crew will just leave the facility. So we're thinking like, how can we make education affordable for the working baristas? We still haven't found the proper calculation yet, but hopefully we can do that in the future.
Yeah. And it's tough because it's expensive to put on a good class at a facility like this. You know, just to get certified, there are a lot of requirements that aren't cheap, like the proper lighting.
Yep. And not only that, we actually truly believe that if you want to learn, you have to make mistakes. If you want to make mistake, you have to waste materials. In some of our classes, we actually use up to like 15 kilo of coffee just for 9 people. We use like 500 liter of water. I don't know how many, I think more than 300 or 400 piece of filter paper, so that people can make mistake and actually learn from that mistakes.
And the electricity to power everything.
Actually, we haven't calculated that.
Write it down, something for the list.
Well, but so far we are able to stay afloat. We actually managed to, the facility next door, we can build it without asking more money from our investors. So actually we're pretty happy with that.
That's good. And it's a nice facility over there. I was looking yesterday, and you have room for 2 roasters for the roasting class. You have 2 espresso machines for training, and then you were able to put in an office space in there as well. Plus you have your green coffee library that's down there.
Well, actually we are planning for 4 espresso machines, so everything there is movable. We can just rearrange the room if we need them. That's why everything is on wheel. Because someday we will grow and we learn one thing about ourselves: we got bored easily. So we just like to move things around.
Get bored, go move the espresso machine.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things we had talked about previously, bring that into here. And one of those things was one of your blog posts. And in the blog post, you mentioned that Indonesian coffee is often kind of confused or lumped in as Sumatran coffee. So people in the West, Europe or the States or where have you, when they think of Indonesian coffee, they think of the spicy, earthy Sumatran. Do you want to talk more about that?
Sure. As an Indonesian, we sort of like brainwashed, thinking that Indonesian coffee is so famous. You can find Indonesian coffee everywhere. Anyone wants Indonesian coffee. So every time I went abroad, one of my goals is actually try to find Indonesian coffee. And as a Q instructor, every 2 years I have to go to the United States, to the West Coast, to do my calibrations. Probably I was going on the wrong period. I usually go during winter time because tickets are much cheaper that days. And during winter time, I couldn't really find Indonesian coffee. And then a few months ago, I have to take my wife to the States so she can take the Q Assistant Instructor. It's her first trip to the US, and I just don't want to lose her on the way there or the way back. So I go with her, and we actually find Indonesian coffee. But what interesting is everything is Sumatra. Everything is labeled as Sumatra. When we talk to the barista, they can tell a good story of Sumatra coffee, but when we ask them whether they have coffee from other regions, they have this like a blank face. So we buy some of this coffee, and we have this small discussion event. We gather some people, baristas, farmers, some media people, whoever willing to come. And we tell our journey, and then we share the coffee. And one of the questions we ask them is, do you think that this is a coffee from Sumatra? Especially coffee from Aceh, because most of them is labeled as Aceh. Most of them think like, no, it doesn't taste like the Aceh we know. And then came up the stories of there's a lot of coffee from other regions is actually being funneled through Medan and then labeled and sold as Sumatra coffee. Why? Because Indonesia is so synonymous with Sumatra that you don't really have to sell them anymore. You don't really have to peddle them. You don't have to do a campaign. People will look for Sumatra. And because they're quite famous, the price is already high. So getting coffee from other area of Indonesia, shipping them to Medan, blend them with coffee from that region and sell them as a Sumatra coffee is still doable. People still can actually make a lot of money by doing that. Is it fair? Well, the farmer still makes money. Right. The trader still makes money. You don't have the concept of traceability because it's a blend of many origins. But at the end of the day, if people likes that coffee, it still support a lot of farmers in Indonesia.
Yeah, it'll do in the meantime until we get an honest fix for it.
Yep,
it'll work.
And then I also had a chat with a friend who's working for international trading companies. I asked him like, why don't you do this campaign like promoting West Java coffee? And he just says like, if we do campaign like that, it's gonna cost us a lot of money. The result is not really gonna can be seen in the near future. And imagine asking you as a consumer, trying to make a gamble on the first thing that you're gonna drink to start your day. If it tastes good, yes, it might work. But if it tastes bad, it's going to be really difficult to ask that person to try to buy that origin or that brand again.
Yeah, it's a gamble.
It's a gamble.
And I wonder how much Starbucks plays a role in the misconception that all Indonesian coffee is Sumatran, because number one, they use Sumatran as one of the backbone in their everyday blend. Mm-hmm. But also they've marketed Sumatran coffee very well. You can see it. They have whole bean bags for sale on the shelves, and it's labeled Sumatran, and mm-hmm. it's marketed very well. And I wonder how much that has affected it. Kind of similar to the way they've affected everyone's perception in the West of what a latte is, for example, because they use so much milk in their lattes that it's kind of skewed everyone's perception of what a true latte is.
Oh, the macchiato.
And the macchiato, yeah.
Well, honestly, without Starbucks, the Indonesian coffee industry wouldn't be like this.
Oh, I totally agree. The specialty coffee industry would have a hard time existing right now without Starbucks.
And Starbucks is actually one of those companies that keep on pushing Indonesian coffee. They actually help a lot of people knows that Indonesia have good coffee. And they actually have, nowadays you're not only gonna find only Sumatra, but you're also gonna find other origins. They used to have this, well, when I went to their roastery a couple of years ago, they have a very good South Sulawesi coffee. But yes, those niche coffee is not appearing every day like the Sumatra. So is it bad? Well, still better than having nothing.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
During my trip to Portland, I also managed to meet this guy. He owned a Indonesian themed coffee shop. So basically, at one point of his life, he do a trip down from Myanmar to Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and end up going back from East Timor. And he fell in love with Indonesia. He then purchased or take over a coffee shop, rebrand them, retheme them, sell Indonesian coffee, sell Indonesian food. And his comment is actually really interesting. While other roasters say that I only know Sumatra, this guy actually says the other way around. His complaint is Indonesia is offering way too much choices that it's really difficult for a small company like him to choose which coffee he's going to sell. And when we talk about Indonesian coffee, it's not just those earthy, spicy coffee, but we also have this beautiful floral, citric coffee. We have this coffee with a lot of fruits, a lot of Indonesia is actually, if you put yourself as a consumer, Indonesia is probably the heaven for coffee drinker because there's a lot of variety, a lot of taste you can get. Yeah. But if you think of it as a trader, it's a nightmare because each of these coffee is being produced by small farmers who can produce only like 300 kilo to 500, 600 kilo a year per hectare. So in order to gather a container load, which is 18 tons, you have to have a lot of farmers.
Right.
A lot of farmers, meaning that it's going to be a big problem with consistency, which is, I think that's the biggest problem that Indonesia have nowadays. Consistencies.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Oh yeah.
When a friend of mine and I were looking into buying a container of coffee from Indonesia and shipping it to the States and trying to sell it, and the people we talked to as potential buyers, one of the things we most often heard was the inconsistency. Can you ensure the consistency of year after year of the quality? And we couldn't.
Nope.
And that is tough.
You don't have even to talk about year after year. Maintaining consistency between early harvest and end of harvest is a big deal for us here.
Yeah, and there's so much that goes into it. Like we were talking earlier, you have farmers who will go and strip pick because if they don't pick soon enough,
someone will pick it for them.
Someone
and
comes
stealing them.
Yeah.
The coffee industry have been crazy the last couple of years in Indonesia. Last year, the production south of the equator actually failed. We only got like probably around 30% of normal, which basically create a huge demand and the price goes really high. It still affect the harvest this year. The demand is still really high. A lot of people are willing to pay a lot for the coffee, which in the long run actually create people who want to steal coffee and create the cherry that's being sold at 19,000 rupiah or like $1.25 a kilo.
For cherries.
For cherries.
And processed cherries.
Yep.
Yeah. And one of the side effects of that, I'm sure, is farmers see that price and think that price is locked in for the future. You know, I could see myself as a farmer thinking, wow, I just got 19,000 rupiah per kilo for cherries last year. Why can't I do that again this year?
Yep. And it's getting crazy, especially since this last couple of weeks, the price of coffee have been like falling. Now we have green bean for like less than $1 a kilo.
Do you think that's because people are kind of realizing that the prices were, it's like a bubble bursting, the prices were too high, it was difficult to move, we've got to drop the prices? Do you think
No, the drop of the price happened because of the long harvest in Brazil and in Colombia. So actually there's oversupply happening in the world. So it's going to be interesting to see how the price collapse in the world side affecting the already high price of coffee in Indonesia. I had this long chat through Twitter with a friend of mine last night, wondering what will happen, wondering whether, well, who's going to be taking most of the damage? Is it going to be the farmer or the trader, or what's going to happen next?
What did you guys think?
Well, at one point I fell asleep. That's the problem with Twitter. I mean, you tweet and then you wait for the response. But personally, I think it's going to be scary.
Yeah.
It's going to be scary because we have people that's been expecting to gain a lot through this coffee. And then suddenly the price of coffee dwindled. I'm so scared that what happened in Bali in the 1970s might happen again. In Bali in 1970s, the farmer actually chopped down the coffee trees and changed them into citrus trees because the price of coffee is so bad.
Yeah.
Growing tree is not like you need like 3-4 years before you can have your first harvest.
Yep.
So chopping down your tree is not something smart to do.
It's a long-term effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I spoke to farmers in Bali who had stumped their coffee trees for orange trees. And the year that I was there working with them, which was 2014 and 2015, some of them were talking about replanting because the prices were back to a place where they thought that it was worthwhile. So, you know, in 2015, we're at 2018, those trees might start bearing fruit right now, but they're probably not going to be economically viable for another year, maybe 2 years.
And a lot of people, when they come to the farmers, the concept they always bring is do a better post-harvest processing. Not too many people come to the farmers thinking that you have to increase the productivity. So in order to make the farmers gaining more, it's not only that you have to do a better post-harvest, but you also have to be able to produce more. That way, the amount of money you're going to get is going to be higher. Nowadays, a lot of people are too focused on post-harvest. They're playing around with the concept of natural wine, coffee, this and that. And it's just like a trend. Suddenly it changed. You fell in love with one coffee, and next year you couldn't find them because the trend changes. So as a consumer, it's not fun.
Yeah, and it's certainly something. It's a trap that I have personally fallen into as well, focusing solely on quality instead of quantity. Wherein the better solution is some sort of a balance, or at least an equation that includes both quantity and quality. I was just watching a video from I think it was James Hoffman. And he did a talk at Let's Talk Coffee in Colombia. And he was talking about this mad, crazy focus on quality that you were talking about, the unique post-harvesting process. Is it red honey? Is it black honey? What is, what cool things are you doing with fermentation? And sometimes that leaves the farmer's head spinning because, he has to learn these new processing techniques. And you know, he bears a lot of the risk with these processing techniques. If he screws up the processing technique, he's ruined a big batch of coffee. It's complicated. It's very complicated.
It's easy for us to say like, oh, sorry, man, quality is not that great. Well, for the farmer, it's like, I'm losing money. Probably not gonna feed my family for a couple of days just because of this screw up. And not a lot of people are actually thinking that way. For us who's living on the consumer side, life is relatively easy because there's a lot of products being offered to us. We can get coffee from like everywhere nowadays. But for the farmers, in order to produce a kilo of coffee, it takes a lot of labor and a lot of time.
Yeah. And it's expensive for the farmer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I had a chat last night with a friend who used to, well, he's a farmer and he used to live in PNG. And basically he says like, nowadays it's even harder for the farmer because consumerism, because of the social media, because the easy access to go to town, consumerism actually make farmers wanting more. And that actually creates a problem where at the end of the day, they want to sell the coffee at a much higher price because they're thinking of, after this, I'm gonna buy this.
That's something that people don't think about.
Yep.
Is as everybody's spending power raises and people are able to consume more, everybody sees that and everybody wants a piece of that pie. That's a very interesting point. And that kind of tees into the younger generation, the next generation taking over the farm. They can see through social media what life is like elsewhere, what life is like in the city, for example, and they think, I want that. And so they're not going to stick around the farm and take over the farm from dad or from granddad or grandma and mom. And so now there's the problem of aging farmers, and it's hard work. You and I were talking about this earlier. You know, there's a lot of heavy lifting, there's a lot of physical labor involved, and as the farmers age, it makes it more and more difficult. The medical bills are rising, risk of injuring oneself raises. It's very complicated.
Especially here in Indonesia, growing Arabica is really difficult because you have to grow them in the mountain. The contour of the land make it difficult for you to move the coffee around. So having young people is probably the problem we're gonna face in the future. And actually that problem already exists in some area in Indonesia. In South Sulawesi, farmers have to go around becoming labor for the other farmers' land so that they can help the harvest. And I think that camera clicks.
I'm having this problem with this camera for some reason.
Well, it's actually not a problem. If I'm not mistaken, it's actually the design of the thing.
Yeah, sorry, say that again?
It's actually a design of the camera. Oh well. Nowadays, a lot of people in South Sulawesi, they have problem in harvesting. Some farmers have to become a labor in other farmers' land so that land can be harvested. They took turn harvesting this land, which basically create another problem, which is some of the coffee is being picked either a little bit too fast or a little bit too late because no one is there to pick them. Another sad part about Indonesian coffee is a lot of people actually think robusta is bad. Well, Indonesia actually grew a lot of them. We here in the lab, we love to play around with robusta. We clean them up, we roast them slightly differently, we brew them using espresso machines. try to make that brew unlike any robusta that people ever drank.
I had one of them yesterday.
Yep. The mantra we have here is making bitter coffee is easy. The game is on how to not to make it bitter. So we just play around and we managed to pull this beautiful, fruity, chocolatey double ristretto from robusta. And that robusta is actually being grown in West Lampung on the elevation, if I'm not mistaken, around 700 to 800 meters above sea level. Would it be able to compete with coffee from Ethiopia? No. Robusta is still Robusta. Yeah. But there are some people who might love this Robusta better than the Ethiopian coffee.
Yeah, and like our friend Rocky says, every bean has a home.
Yep, I agree on that.
And I definitely agree with that. I mean, you know, that the Robusta you served me yesterday, the espresso, was very good. And I know a lot of people who specifically like the flavor of Robusta. They usually equate it with a Vietnamese coffee, myself included. You know, when I tasted it yesterday, the first thing I thought of was the Vietnamese coffee brewed in the fin. The only difference is the espresso was so good, you didn't have to have the condensed milk to offset the bitterness, which is pretty common with Vietnamese coffee done in the fin. It's very bitter. You need the condensed milk to offset it.
Well, we actually like to play around with like a lot of people coming in saying like, I don't drink Robusta are rubbish and this and that. And we just serve them like, here, have a try. Oh, this is nice. So you blend Arabica and Robusta? No, 100% Robusta. No way.
Yeah, well, there was no bitterness to it. It was very mellow, very chocolatey, mild. And like I kept saying yesterday, it had a subtle, sneaky sweetness to it that kept coming up at the end, and it was very enjoyable.
If I pull it a little bit longer, you're gonna have an interesting saltiness coming in. And that saltiness will work really well with the milk as a cappuccino.
I bet. I'll have to try one of those today. One of the other things that we talked about yesterday that I wanted to get back to today was, again, I think it was from your blog, you had mentioned that, you know, we have access to all of this information, rapid access to information, and it's not necessarily making us smarter. Can you go into that some?
Well, basically it also relates to what the farmer now have to face nowadays. A lot of people coming to the farm, sharing the stories of successes, quests and the post-harvest, playing around with yeast, playing around with this and that. A lot of people think that if a world champion doing something, it must be something right, which probably it is in his situation. That's why he's a world champion. But it might not plausible. It might not the same case with what we face on daily basis. Here we come. You mentioned the word cowboy earlier. We met in the coffee industries in Indonesia. We have a lot of cowboys coming in saying that, please brew me your coffee. Please do it the way this guy do it. This degree of water, this ratio, this and that. And they expect the coffee will be great. And usually we just brew it for them, and then we brew it the coffee ourselves and just serve both and ask them to compare. And usually what happens is the guy agree that the coffee we brew tastes a little bit better. Not because we are a better brewer than the world champion, but we just know the coffee better. It's our coffee. We understand the minerals inside the water that we use here. Or like, sometimes we get blindfolded by the information we got. We can get them really fast, really easy, and a lot of time we don't spend some time to try to digest that information. Something right usually happen for a reason. Without knowing that reason, the right might be wrong. And it happens lately nowadays. It happens more and more nowadays.
Yeah, and we were talking about social media playing a big part of this, where you can have somebody who gives the impression, whether they do it intentionally or maliciously, it doesn't matter. They give the impression that they're an expert. And people see that and think he is or she is an expert. And they go with that advice. And it may not be great advice, or it may not include the total picture, the entire picture.
Yeah, sometimes we react to a tweet that is probably a part of a series of tweets. If we took some time to read the whole stuff, probably we're gonna get a different picture than just reading that one tweet. And sometimes we react a bit too vicious on it. Yes, just say an owner of a company do something bad in his past. Do we need to punish the whole company? Because there's a lot of people who actually making money from that company, who do no mistakes, probably have no correlations to what happens in the past. And if we sort of kill the company, we're not only killing the guy who do the sin, we also kill the guy who tried to make a living for his family. And it's not really fair for me.
Yeah, it's mob mentality.
Yeah.
Dragging the entire company through the dirt because of what a couple of knuckleheads did. Yeah, I agree with that. Agree with that totally. It's one of the downsides of social media and being able to virtue signal, all of that. It's a train wreck.
Well, I'm one of those people who embrace social media in the early days. I love having discussion through Twitters in the middle of the night with a bunch of friends. I love arguing just for the sake of arguing, but then I know that just arguing, we're just having fun. Nowadays, and I didn't tweet, I didn't do social media as much as I normally do. I don't even blog as much as I do because there's this worriness that whatever I try to read, I try to write, is being read the wrong thing, the wrong way, because when you write, there's no emotion you can attach to.
And you say the wrong thing, and now you're suddenly on the opposite side.
Yep.
The opposite side. And you're now one of them, not one of us.
Yep.
That's one of my pet peeves about it right now. The state of the industry is cliquish, and we should be better than that. We should be more communal, more community-oriented. You know, the specialty coffee industry should rally around each other more than we are, I think, right now.
And which is probably that's the reasons why I love Bandung. I grew up in Bandung. I was born in Bandung, but I spent some of my life in Jakarta, the capital city. When I moved back to Bandung, I feel like this is the area which I want my family to grow. I love the way that the barista community here, the manual brew community, we able to do competitions without having to have big sponsorships. We can have a bunch of coffee shops spending a little amount of money, sharing stuff, sharing equipments to build a competition for young baristas. We love that spirit. We love the spirit of working together, and it's one of those weird situations where people actually want to volunteer as a crew and not as a competitors. During the competition days, there's a lot of coffee shop closing down because either the equipment is being used by the competitions or the crew is there helping out the competitions. And it's something that I miss a lot nowadays.
Yeah, it's very soothing is a bad word, comforting is a bad word, but it's very pleasant experience.
Mm-hmm.
And the only other place I've seen it like that is Padang,
Yep.
Indonesia.
Yep.
And both communities are very near to production, and I wonder how much of that plays a part in it. You know, the whole notion of this is our coffee because it was grown just an hour or so from here by our people. You know, it's maybe bad to say our people, but it is still communal and it is still family oriented. I think that's very good.
Yep. Well, for the competitions, usually for the first round, the community is gonna be supplying the coffee, and we usually use the coffee from farmers around our city. So I think that's the luxury of doing a competition in origin, because you have a lot of coffee you can showcase.
Yeah.
But the bad part is some people will took it into politics and try to use coffee for certain political purposes. But well,
Yeah, they turn it into a coffee competition, not a barista competition.
well, some actually turning it into a way so that people can vote for them in the future, not really caring about the coffee. But well, thank God the governor election is passed, so I think we passed that.
Yeah. Time to move on.
Yep.
So one last thing, we had talked about future roasting classes here. I think you and I have nailed down, not you and I think we have nailed down dates. So we're looking at November 21st for a roasting class, and we're going to do a combo class. So we'll do, the first day will be foundation, and then the next 3 days will be roasting intermediate.
And actually, one of the point I request you to do is to make this class hard. In our lab, we don't believe that you come to the class to get a certificate. You actually come to learn. And when you want to learn, you have to experience a lot. So I think on that roasting class, you guys gonna roast a lot of coffee.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can have fun.
Yeah, I think so.
There's no point of doing a class and not having fun.
Exactly. And I did a couple of roasts on the machines yesterday and the day before, and thoroughly enjoyed it. They're fun machines. They're going to give people a good experience of what it's like to roast coffee for those who are doing the foundational. And for those who are doing the intermediate, it's going to be a familiar control interface. There won't be any surprises to anybody who's used to any of the machines that they're using in production right now.
Well, the machine we have is nothing fancy. It's a very basic machines, but I think laying your hands or learning on a very basic machine is actually going to be better, because after that you can play around with any machines you have.
Yeah.
If you start your journey on a ultra fancy machines, a lot of, well, through my experience with barista or through photography, a lot of people get stuck with that brand, and they're using it not because they're good, they're using it because they don't know how to operate the other type of machines. And hopefully we can provide you with a good basic experience.
I think we can.
Yeah.
And we'll make it difficult.
Yep.
Challenge accepted.
Please do.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
I really enjoyed sitting down and talking to you. And the space is awesome. And the things that you guys are doing for the coffee community here and everywhere else. I'm on board with it. I think it's great, and keep on with it.
Thank you. And we're gonna be doing a lot more classes with Michael. Just wait and see.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.